All right, so a couple days ago, one of my viewers wanted me to comment on the Barry Weiss issue, and it's been, a few days already, and it's kind of lost a little bit of the steam. But yesterday, somebody sent me a video of her speaking about what it means to be a Jew and how he was inspired by it. And I want to say that I don't get inspired by anything Barry Weiss does, least of all her lofty words about anti-Semitism and all that, because the fact is that she is one of these people who is trafficking on prestige. She's a person who was always connected, and she got into the New York Times by knowing the right people and moving in the right circles rather than by actually having any real career accomplishments. And some people would say to me, "Wait, what are you talking about? She's spent her entire career fighting against anti-Semitism on campus, things like that." I get it that people have activist causes. I don't think it warrants them being considered great intellectual leaders. And she wrote this letter saying, "It is with sadness that I write to tell you that I am resigning from the New York Times. I joined the paper with gratitude and optimism. 3 years ago, I was hired with the goal of bringing in voices that would not otherwise appear in your pages. First-time writers, centrists, conservatives, and others who would not naturally think of the Times as their home. The reason for this effort was clear. The paper's failure to anticipate the outcome of the 2016 election meant that it didn't have a firm grasp of the country it covers. Dean Baquette and others have admitted as much on various occasions. The priority and opinion was to help redress that critical shortcoming." Dean Baquette, for those of you who don't know, is editor-in-chief of the Times. Then you get to, this is the most, now she put a list of huge names of people that she had right in the Times. And some of those people I do respect, like Nick Gillespie, I think is a thoughtful person. I think he's much more of a doctrinaire libertarian than me, but he is very strong on the economics. You also have Ayaan Hirsi Ali, respect her a lot, and Glenn Lowry. I think if you haven't heard of Glenn Lowry, he's really having a big impact right now because he's one of these black economists that's fighting against the BLM message of racial division. But some of these other people I don't really respect. For example, um, Chloe Valderi, I think is somebody who I think is a bullshit artist. I think she believes in what she says, but is mainly emotional crap, and most of it has to do with what I would call, dime store Zionist activism. And I say this as someone, I hope to make it clear here that, I served in the IDF, I am Jewish and everything, but I remember listening to a talk she had with Dave Rubin, who we'll get to hopefully soon. And she was talking about this idea called the theory of enchantment, meaning that she wanted people to change their opinion on the Israel-Palestine conflict by making them fall in love with Israel and the Jews, and that's not a logical mindset. You don't you the idea that you're gonna have people's emotions and sympathies cloud their judgment is in my opinion wrong. It's completely idiotic. And it hasn't worked, by the way. It's been a total disaster among most people, except for people who are explicitly, evangelical Christians, or in some other way they might have some sort of religious affinity towards the Jews in Israel. Now, I think most of this video is not really going to be about just that issue, but she also wrote this: "Twitter is not on the masthead of the New York Times, but Twitter has become its ultimate editor. As the ethics and mores of that platform have become those of the paper itself has increasingly become a kind of performance space. Stories are chosen and told in a way to satisfy the narrowest of audiences, rather than to allow a curious public to read about the world and then draw their own conclusions. I was always taught that journalists were charged with writing the first rough draft of history. Now history itself is one more ephemeral thing, molded to fit the needs of a predetermined narrative. So then she goes on to document, or at least talk about, she doesn't document anything, but she talks about what I guess would be the anti-Semitic atmosphere at work, where people say, oh, she's writing about the Jews again and things like that. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if that's happening, but I don't really necessarily, like, I think that Barry Weiss, as someone who is now suddenly waking up and saying, oh, I finally had to leave or whatever, this was long, long past the time to leave. The fact is that when they hired Sarah Jeong, and she was a huge anti-white person, saying all sorts of things. I think one of her tweets was something about how it would be better for like older white people to die, or I don't remember. Maybe I'm muddling the topic, but at that time when they hired her and she saw no consequences from her past, Barry Weiss did nothing. She didn't leave. And the other thing is, I want people to remember is that the New York Times not only did it lie about Russia and the Mueller investigation for the past 3 years, not only that, but now that it's been conclusively shown that the New York Times actually may have either published information that had no source regarding purported contacts between Trump aides and the Russian intelligence, or they were fed information that was proved wrong by the FBI itself. Even with all of that coming to light, Barry Weiss hasn't denounced the New York Times attitude towards the Russia investigation and how they repeatedly published bad information. So yeah, I would say that I have very little sympathy for Barry Weiss. There was a different article I wanted to pull up here. Might have. Okay, here we go. So another area where she really went crazy here. In August of last year, she said, Donald Trump and the disloyal Jews, a president loyal only to himself, uses my community as a political weapon. And she starts to say, the major debate tearing apart the Jewish community, the American Jewish community on this particular Wednesday is whether or not the 45th president of the United States just accused us of disloyalty to Israel and the Jewish people, or of disloyalty to the Republican Party and the man who has remade it in his image. Where has the Democratic Party gone? Where have they gone? Where are they? Where they are defending these two people over the state of Israel? President Trump said on Tuesday, referring to Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib. So you might remember last year those two congresswomen were barred from entering Israel. Democratic congressmen who support the boycott movement against Israel. And I think any Jewish people that vote for a Democrat, I think it shows that either a total lack of knowledge or great disloyalty. And then she says, "As my people say, new." That's one of these annoying things that you hear, like Jews will say to you. That's like an impatient thing. Like, it means come on. What do you hear in the president's? Now she kind of uses that improperly, but whatever. What do you hear in the president's statement, which, like many things he blurts out, manages to be both opaque and outrageous at once? If you're pro-Trump or Trump curious, you'll generously hear an assertion that Jews should be loyal to Israel. If you're anything like me, you can't help but hear echoes of the sinister charge of dual loyalty. I've been around enough tables with pro-Trump Jews to strongly suspect that this is a riff on a theme that Mr. Trump himself has overheard at many dinners with Ivanka and Jared, the favorite daughter and doll fan. Dismay that even those Jews who have appreciated the president's policies, moving the embassy to Jerusalem, recognizing Israeli sovereignty over the Golan Heights, cracking down on Iran, will never pull the lever for him. It's easy to imagine what they say. Look how much you've done, more than any other president. They should be grateful. Why can't they see that? Why can't they see that the Democratic Party has abandoned them? Meantime, you're more pro-Israel than most American Jews. Indeed, on Wednesday afternoon at the White House, Mr. Trump clarified as much. If you want to vote Democrat, you're being very disloyal to the Jewish people and very disloyal to Israel. Um, and that's really where she should have ended it. She said, brace yourself for further presidential Twitter rants on the matter because I do not believe that Mr. Trump is capable of higher order thoughts about loyalty to the office in which he sits, loyalty to the Republican, above all, loyalty to the idea of keeping America united. Fealty to him is the only litmus test. And this is like she just goes on and on, and she talks about white supremacists. Here it says, more to the point, will white supremacists like the one arrested Monday in Ohio or the one arrested Tuesday in Miami parse these Talmudic distinctions about who was in fact the subject of the disloyalty in that Tuesday sentence, or will they hear, as they have always heard in this president's rants against the globalists, the elitists, the invading immigrants organized by George Soros, and all the shady forces keeping the hardworking men and women of America down, the word Jew? So I want this to be very clear. Bari Weiss has always been a lying piece of crap, and she hasn't changed, and there's no reason to really look at her in a more positive light just because she dumped the New York Times. The fact is that if you are a person who is, following what's going on with Joe Biden and the Middle East specifically, he's completely flipped and become literally the antithesis of everything that Bari Weiss normally would be supporting. He is militantly talking about, like for example, he is right now talking about potentially. I believe he said that he might consider revoking portions of the aid to Israel in order to prevent them from annexing parts of the West Bank and expanding settlements. Now, let me be clear here. My position, not Bari Weiss's position, my position is that I'm against the foreign aid, period. Having nothing to do with whether it's Israel or not. I've been against foreign aid to all the countries: Turkey, Israel, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia. Who else do we give aid to? Colombia. I've been blanket across the board for all the countries, and I've taken heat for it. So I'm not the person defending giving the foreign aid. In fact, I would say, why give the foreign aid at all? I think in many cases some of the Israelis would say they don't need the foreign aid. Not enough, in my opinion. You have this thing though, where she has been basically this pincushion for people on the left on Twitter. Michael Tracy, for example, who's not the worst journalist, but he said people like Ben Shapiro, Dave Rubin, and Bari Weiss, who constantly whine about identity politics and SJWs, abandon all their claimed objections the instant the topics of Israel or anti-Semitism come up, thereby demonstrating that they are total frauds on these issues. Well, that's the issue. That I don't like Ben Shapiro at all, and I certainly don't like Bari Weiss. Dave Rubin, I sort of, his show is less about opinions and it's more about discussions. I sort of like Dave Rubin's show. I've liked it less since he started working with the Blaze. And also, a while ago, he started having neocons on. But the fact of the matter is that earlier this year, what Michael Tracy forgets to mention is that in the early months of 2020, there was a wave of actual assassination attempts and violent assaults on the streets of New York against Hasidic men and sometimes women, and even an attempted, like, not just an attempted bombing, but the murders of a number of Jews in Jersey City and in Muncie. So Michael Tracy can pretend that it's not a problem, and I will tell you that I think that in some cases the issues of anti-Semitism are exaggerated, because a lot of the people who are talking about them don't have any personal they don't have any personal plans to do anything about it. They'll talk about it and they'll do nothing. And on that note, I don't normally talk about people that I hang around. But I've had a number of people that I know who are Jewish come to me and ask about getting their CCWs, and I've set up like a few of them with a person I know who does the training just this week to do it. So I'm a person, I've done whatever I can to, be prepared in case of, a violent issue, a violent, outbreak or something. And I'm trying to help other people do it. I don't think that these people like Ben Shapiro, Dave Rubin, and Barry Weiss are doing much about it. Dave Rubin, I think, might be open to it, but Ben Shapiro and Barry Weiss, I think that they might, the first time that they fire a weapon, they might recoil in pain from the noise. It's pathetic, and that's something that I think is a huge criticism. It's a valid criticism of the Jewish community that they don't want to actually deal with the idea that sometimes you do have to suffer in order to survive. Dave Rubin was criticized a couple years ago by Barry Weiss. She claimed that he would just do these interviews without actually pushing back on the people he's interviewing. And she called him him and all the people around him, like Sam Harris, members of the intellectual dark web. That's where the phrase comes from. She made up this ridiculous phrase, the intellectual dark web, about people like Dave Rubin and Ben Shapiro and Sam Harris. And I think they even lump in Stefan Molyneux once in a while. And, Brett and Eric Weinstein, people like that, and Peter Boghossian. So you have this massive amorphic. It's not even massive. It's just a gaggle of liberal centrist intellectuals that get together on YouTube and they talk about stuff, and they don't have very much political power. They just have media power because they have a very loyal audience. That's about it. That's the only thing I will say. I don't even I wouldn't say that I'm an IDW person, but you have people like Rubin, you have people like Jordan Peterson, and Claire Lehman of the Quillette. Those are the people that she's talking about as if he's doing something wrong. So Dave Rubin, in response to that, on July 15th, after Barry Weiss left the New York Times, said, "Last thought on the Barry Weiss thing." So he says, "My husband just reminded me about a conversation she had with Barry about 2 years ago where he calls his husband by the female pronoun, where because Dave Rubin's a gay guy, where she apologized to him for throwing me under the bus in the IDW article, but said she was forced to do it. If we are clearing the air about what the New York Times has become, then that's worth mentioning. I don't need an apology or even an admission. It's just an additional piece of the puzzle at what was once a place of journalism. I welcomed her on my show when the piece was printed and when her book came out. Offer stands." And then he corrects the error he says he had with Barry. So this is the issue that Barry Weiss is being used as this martyr. So this is a person, she's consistently been wrong about many, many, many things. Let me see if I can find this clip. So this is one of the best clips. I actually recorded this video a couple days ago, and I had to re-record it now because it just took so long. So hopefully this will be a little less long.
What do you think happens with him?
Oh, I don't know who can beat him. I don't know who can beat him. Who do you think can beat him?
That's a good question. I don't know. Hillary can't. I'm so worried.
Duh.
Yeah, but I'm so worried she's going to run again. She's going to muscle her way to the top.
I don't know who can beat him right now. And I don't know.
Why do you think that?
Right, and the question, right, is
as
like...
things keep going further and further south.
So she almost says, "I'm scared." And that's like... like the thing is, so she's an opinion writer for the New York Times, so I guess she can technically have an opinion and she can show her bias, but it's pretty glaring that the person who claims to be the moderating influence of the New York Times, the person who gives voice to the conservatives, libertarians, moderate liberals there, that she says, "Oh, I'm scared that Trump's going to get elected again." So, there is no, the New York Times is not by any stretch of the imagination at all objective in any sense. It's very much a product of the bubble of the East Coast.
What about someone who is a centrist Democrat? Doesn't that make more sense? That someone who's a rational person, who's on the right, who's gonna look at this person who's maybe economically conservative but socially liberal and say, this is really where
unless
I'm
they
leaning
run
towards.
someone on the far left and like on an identity politics platform. That's what scares me.
Yeah, that's not going to work.
Well, could it though?
I don't think so.
I don't know, because Trump's whole thing was screw the center. I just need to make my base go ape shit crazy for me.
But they're still ape shit crazy, and no matter what he
know,
does.
and I'm worried that the Democrats are going to try and replicate that strategy and be like, we just need to make our base go ape shit crazy, rather than running someone that can win the center.
So think about how that statement came true, but in not the right way. They didn't get the far left didn't get their candidate as the nominee for president, but so they have Biden in as the nominee for president, but he's no product of the radical left. He has to pander to them and basically beg for their votes. But that's what's happening, that the person who was supposedly the stopgap against the radical left, Joe Biden, simply is too weak to stand up to the radical fruitcakes that she was so scared of.
I see where you're going, but I think that this is maybe my liberal bias, but I think that people on the left wouldn't fall for that the same way people on the right would. I don't think people on the left who saw someone who went ape shit, full woke, far left. I think there's a lot of people in the center who be like, "What? I'm just gonna vote libertarian, man. I'm gonna vote for Gary Johnson or some shit."
But okay, so who's in right now? So we have Kamala, Kirsten
Tulsi
Gillibrand. Oh, monstrous.
So after she mentions Kamala Harris and Kirsten Gillibrand, the one person that Joe Rogan mentions that she recoils from is Tulsi Gabbard. So you'll see how ridiculous it is, how she uses her rationale to dump on Tulsi Gabbard.
Ideas.
Well, when she was 22, she had...
No, she's an Assad toady.
What does that mean?
She is
What's a toady?
I think that I used that word correctly. Jamie, can you check what toady means?
Like toeing the line? Is that what it means?
No, I think it's like a...
Do you realize how stupid it is that you use an insult against someone using a word that you don't know? I think Jimmy Dore made a lot of hay out of this. And as much as I disagree with Jimmy Dore on almost any issue, it's very easy to see why she basically gave a ton of ammo to people to use against her with this clip.
Toadie.
Then she misspells the word toady. It's Toady.
What does that mean?
I think it means what I think it means.
Toady. Definition of toadies. A person
A
who
sycophant,
flatters or defers to others for self-serving reasons.
A sycophant.
So she's an Assad sycophant. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's known about her.
Like, what did she say that
we have to look.
her?
I don't remember the details.
We probably should say that before we say that about her. We should probably read it rather.
Well, I have read it.
No, I mean, we should now.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Just so we know what she said.
Look up
I've had her
Tulsi
on
Gabbard.
here before.
Look
and
up
I really enjoyed talking to her. I like her a lot.
Are you serious?
Yeah, I like talking to her.
Okay.
I like talking to her. I don't know about...
I think she's like the motherlode of bad ideas.
Whoa.
I'm pretty positive about that, especially on Assad.
I'm pretty positive about something that I don't have any evidence of, and I can't cite, and I don't have anything that I can show you. But I'm pretty positive about it, even though you've sat across the desk from this person and didn't see any of that.
But maybe I'm wrong. I don't think I'm wrong.
Well, my take on her was that I think as a person who's coming from the left, who's also a veteran, and is very articulate and sensible and a woman. And in talking to her, we didn't get into Assad or any of those things, but talking to her about what she feels is wrong with the current administration and the way things are running and a direction she thinks things could go in. She had some very promising ideas. I didn't know about this.
But doesn't she also, did she ever apologize for believing in conversion therapy?
I didn't even know she believed in conversion therapy.
Am I crazy?
Is that real?
So the fact is that she did apologize for that many, many, many times. And the other issue is, like, who cares if Tulsi Gabbard believes in conversion therapy? Nobody's gonna snatch Barry Weiss, who's a lesbian. Okay, Barry Weiss, I think, has a girlfriend named Nellie Bowles, and nobody's gonna snatch her into a van and take her to some hideaway somewhere and force her to look at, covers of Men's Health magazine or something. And nobody's gonna at work. Nobody. I mean, she didn't say it in the letter. Okay, so nobody is going to go and slip, big sausages into her lunchbox at the work refrigerator. Okay, these things are not happening. So she can stop complaining about conversion therapy, which has never been a real problem. The conversion therapy, just here's my stance on it. Okay, I don't really like people who like I don't like this idea that we have to accept deviant lifestyles as if they're completely normal. And therefore, when I hear that there are some of these people who live these deviant lifestyles who think, well, maybe there's a way for me to behave differently, and they go and do these things, I don't see it as really being harmful. Maybe some of these treatments could be harmful, and there's laws and ways people can sue if they get harmed by them. But in general, we're not seeing an epidemic of gay people getting snatched away in vans and taken for conversion therapy. It just never happened. So it's not a big problem, and it's a non-issue. I don't think Tulsi Gabbard ever had she never should have even responded to it. It should have been like, hey, bite me.
Almost positive this is real. I think her father ran
when you say conversion therapy, you're talking about gay people.
Yes.
Yeah. No, I didn't know that. I never heard that. I did hear something about when she was very young. She was like 22. She had said something about gay marriage and civil unions that she apologized for and said that she evolved. She reveals she met Assad in Syria without informing top Democrats.
I'm telling you, She
said she went on a fact-finding mission in support of peace for Syrian people, but characterized U.S.-backed rebels as terrorists.
Yeah, I mean, hold on.
I can keep looking, but
I'm telling you,
I don't have enough time to research everything all at the same time.
I can come back on when I know more.
Okay, but we can do this another time.
Okay.
But who do you think stands out for you as someone that would make a good president?
Yeah, she once touted working for an anti-gay group that backed conversion therapy. Anyway.
She once touted working for an anti...
She worked for an anti-gay group.
She worked for them like she had a job there?
What?
I'm worried as a person who's been called alt-right adjacent.
I'm just looking
I'm worried
it up.
about labels. No, I understand. But you know what I mean?
Rep. Tulsi Gabbard in the early 2000s touted working for her father's anti-gay organization, which mobilized to pass a measure
Nobody cares.
against same-sex marriage in Hawaii and promoted controversial conversion therapy.
Ooh.
Yeah. FYI.
So in light of that, I'm happy that I voted for Tulsi Gabbard in the 2020 primary. I'm happy that I registered as a Democrat, even though I don't agree with the Democrats on anything, and voted for Tulsi Gabbard. Because if that's what Tulsi Gabbard believes in, that you can, if you're like full on like Liberace gay, and you think, oh, maybe I can actually live like somebody else, like some person that has a more normal life, if there's people like that who want to do something like that, take conversion therapy, I don't care. It's fine. It really isn't a problem. And you have a lot of these people who are pretending that Tulsi Gabbard is some sort of thought criminal or something. I think I'm going to leave it here. The fact is that there were these chats that were leaked like a while back, uh, detailing exactly what Barry Weiss was talking about. That there were people who were gunning for her at the New York Times, and people who were trying to get her fired for saying, calling Mirai Nagasu an immigrant, even though she wasn't. And saying, "Oh, she's horrible." It says leaked transcripts of chat feeds. New York Times employees are pissed about Barry Weiss. So it's not as if this is unknown. So here's a chat transcript that says she's doubling down, comparing her tweet to articles like this one, which note the difference between being the daughter of immigrants versus being an immigrant. Person B, I guess it's too much to even expect a quote, "We're sorry you're offended" apology since Asians don't matter. Person C, and she's being untruthful about having misquoted the song. Person B, I guess you get full Twitter privileges at the New York Times when you are consistently factually wrong. If interesting could be used to describe flashbacks of internment of Japanese Americans. Sorry, but I felt that tweet denied Mirai her full citizenship just as the internment did, and nothing will be done because no one was offended since we don't count. Person D, I was offended. I think a lot of people were. So there's a lot of these people who are basically dumping on her, and it goes. I mean, this is a lot of people. So shortly after this conversation, Bennett's section announced it had hired Quinn Norton as a columnist. Almost instantly, Twitter users discovered that Norton had previously boasted about her friendship with neo-Nazis. Among other troubling facts, that internal discussion was apparently taken to a much smaller private Slack room. 7 hours and a considerable amount of Twitter furor later, the Times announced that it had decided to fire Norton. So, this is, I would say, it's the Times eating itself alive. I think this is a great thing. What's happening? I don't care if Barry Weiss had to leave. Screw her. What we're seeing right now is the caving of really what was once considered the consensus media in America. People are now seeing this. First of all, this was a massively well-known story. I was going to play the Matt Taibbi interview with The Hill. Let me see if I can get the right space. I will play this before I leave.
And others can rise up and just tell the truth. On the other hand, this is the destruction of a storied institution. We used to have a paper of record in this country that had some semblance of trying to be fair, represent the whole country, not succumb to many of these campaigns that we're seeing. How do you think about this as an independent journalist yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to end up working out great for people like me and for people like you and Crystal. But I think it's a real loss for the profession. As much as I've criticized the New York Times over the years, it was and it has been a very important institution in America. Just the sheer amount of resources that they were able to throw at certain issues, just to be able to count things like the damage that is done in wars and things like that.
Right.
No one else has that kind of reach. And what ends up happening, what people don't understand is the damage that's done by this is not to, like, say, the conservative point of view. The damage is actually done to the liberal-minded readers and the people who work in these institutions, because when you don't have those other points of view, that's when you make mistakes like 2016, when the New York Times completely missed the entire Trump phenomenon and miscalled the election because they weren't in touch with what's going on in the rest of the country. Like, if you have a monoculture within your newsroom, that's when you're going to be blind to important things, and that is going to really seriously damage the news gathering mission that is probably the first thing that's most important in what you're doing.
Yeah.
So I think we'll leave it there. And this was, I think, one of the main media stories of the past couple weeks. And yeah, I think with the New York Times falling apart, with CNN basically having record low viewers, ESPN having very low viewers, in the sports world, the viewership of all these networks, the declining reader base of the New York Times, the circulation lowering, we're seeing actually a good landscape for those of us that don't want Biden to win, those of us that want to keep America, relatively free. Obviously, there's a lot of problems with Donald Trump, but I support him removing the troops from Afghanistan. I support especially his efforts on the border, and I wish, certainly that we could get some of the other priorities issues done, such as healthcare and resolving the trade war with all these other countries like China. But we'll talk about that at a different time. Please like, share, and subscribe. You can also find me on all of these other platforms right behind me. I got BitChute, Minds.com, Subscribestar if you want to donate, Gab, Library, and Parler. Talk to you later.